If you had to break down, I mean, would you say you're a growth operator? Is that the title you give
I just
to
say it's
this?
an agency, honestly. I just think it's like a B2B agency because that was what it was being called before. Like, I think, obviously there are certain people that popularized that term to make it sound like different to what it was. But when we were doing it, it was just called a normal agency. We were just like, I think it was like an extension of content and appointment setting agency. That's kind of like what they were calling us back then. So I just described it as like, yeah, I'm a B2B agency. I work with education companies, consulting companies, coaching companies, which is basically what they are. I just don't like to, put that term to kind of like describe what I do because there's been people doing it way before it was called that, and obviously I feel like that term has like a negative connotation because obviously there's a bunch of beginners. I just say it's a educational company, and I work with B2B, educational creators and coaches and consultants. So yeah,
And we spoke about this yesterday, but this is a space that a lot of the big guys
yeah,
are getting into. It was something that was more niche, something that was more protected, and now, a lot of people are speaking about it, trying
yeah.
to get others on it. Why do you think that is, and where do you see that going?
I feel like people start to realize how much money there is in this space. I feel like now that the bigger guys have been more open about how much they actually make from info businesses, I think it's opened like the floodgates for people to be like, oh wow, it's actually not as difficult. And the upside to obviously, launching consulting offers and just selling your information is extremely high. There's guys like, Jordan Watch started doing it. See, you got Elon, you got a bunch of different guys that are now just selling coaching programs, teaching other people what they've been doing. But they have been doing it before. Like that's how they made all the money. But I think now they're being super public about it, like very open about it. So now people are trying to understand, okay, cool, how can I get into it? I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I just think now the space is just going to be a little bit more focused on the people that are actually good at what they do. So I think it's only going to benefit the people who are at the top that know what they're doing. And then the people at the bottom, it's going to become harder and harder because those people who are starting to get into it are exposed to better information now than there was before. Because back, let's say if you go back like 2.5 or 3 years ago, the information on how to scale a consulting company or an educational product is just, it was just horrible back then. There was no one really giving good information apart from like the top killers. Now, some people out there giving actually decent information. So I think, the level of sophistication is just rising up, which every market does at a certain point. So I think info is just starting to catch up.
And you mentioned, now it's going to be something harder to get into. It's
Yeah.
going to kind of cut out the bullshit, right?
Yeah.
How do you think you were able to succeed? What did it take to succeed so young within that space?
I think obviously I came in at, I won't say it's the perfect time, but at a decent time where there wasn't really that many people like doing it. Like you wouldn't search the word, the growth operating term and see like 100 people. Like no one even knew what that was. Like there wasn't a ton of people doing it. But I think what really made me stand out is I just did the basic stuff and I obviously didn't like change what I was doing like midway through. There was a bunch of people that would go after that niche and obviously they wouldn't sign a client in like, first 1, 2 months and they would just completely pivot and be like, yeah, everyone's doing it. I just switch out. But I remember those guys saying everyone's doing it 2 years ago. If they came now, they would be like, yo, what's going on here? So I think that was one of the biggest things, not obviously like switching during that period. And then I think the second thing was just honestly just basic principles. A lot of the time, things are actually way easier than we actually make it out to be. Because when you get told, hey, if you do XYZ, this will happen. So just do that. Some people will try deviate from it, or some people will try change something because they're so used to trying new things based on like how the brain has been like wired. Everyone wants to try new stuff, but a lot of people don't do the same thing for 6 to 12 months. A lot of the guys that we did really well for, they did the same thing for like 6 to 12 months straight. We didn't do anything different. We didn't, play around with different, strategies, funnels, blah blah blah. Obviously, you try stuff, but you don't play around with a bunch of stuff when you figure out something's working. So I feel like I just didn't change most of the things that were working for me at that time until I had to, or until I think there was something that was going to be way better, and that honestly helped me a ton. So yeah.
And in terms of skill sets wise, what
Mhm.
do you think people actually need to know to be able to do well within that space?
I think honestly, it might be shocking. I think honestly, most of the things you can learn can come from one book or from one course or one YouTube video. What ends up happening is people always like to make new stuff. There's always a new funnel that came out. There's always a new Instagram technique to get story views. There's always a new YouTube technique to get more calls. There's always a new sales call process. There's always new stuff. Every month there's going to be something new that people are going to try, new ad strategy, etc., etc. So what always happened, and I saw this happen thousands of times, hundreds, not even thousands, maybe hundreds of times, where people would have clients, something's clearly working. What they have to do is just put more fuel to the fire, and they're like, "Mees, what do you think of this strategy?" I'm like, "Bro, you're making 50K already doing this strategy. Why do you want to switch to something else?" "Oh, I think it's better." "Why do you think it's better?" "I don't know. This guy said it's better." And then they switch, and then I tell them no, but sometimes people don't listen, and you switch to it, and then they end up making no money. And then they're like, "Oh, maybe it didn't work." And I'm like, "Bro, why did you switch what you were doing?" And then they had to build up all that momentum back from what they were previously doing, and then they have to obviously change it. I think Alex Ramosi even talks about this a lot. Like, it happens all the time. So many people, they have something that's actually doing well, but then they'll be like, "Nah, I want to try something different." And it happens all the time. So I think that's one of the biggest things. Like, it's because we could say skill set wise, but I think honestly the skill set to skill in info business is like 50K. You can get that in a 4 or 5 hour course. Like, it's not that difficult if you know what you're doing. People just don't have the perseverance to just do it for a long time. You just honestly need to know the rules. That's why I tell people you need to know the rules and the fundamentals, and then everything else can just be like left to just kind of like perception. Like, for example, same thing. Let's say you're teaching someone sales. You just need to know the rules of like, hey, in sales, this is exactly what you're trying to do. Whatever question, whatever sequence you use, you just want this outcome. So you can go and get that outcome. It's the same thing with football. It's like, yo, this is exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to score a goal with your legs. So whatever you do to get that outcome, it doesn't matter. You just have to get that. You get what I mean? And then you obviously tell them the normal rules, like, offside stuff, whatever. But once you have the rules and you have the playing field, you can get creative and you can start thinking about stuff. But when you start getting super granular into like the details of the funnels, blah, 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 you're going to start overcomplicating that stuff for yourself. You're going to create variables that didn't even exist. You just created them for yourself, and you're not going to get to your goal. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen it happen many times. Like, for example, anytime I build a funnel, the way I look into, okay, cool, is the funnel going to work or is this not going to work? I just look back to fundamentals. Fundamentally speaking, we're trying to create as the least amount of friction possible for someone to book a call. Does this add a ton of friction? If I think it does, I'm not going to do the funnel. It doesn't have to be like, yo, let me try the strategy, blah, blah, blah. It just comes down to the rules. It's the playbook, the principles. If the principles are not aligned with what this thing is teaching, I'm not going to do it. So that's the same thing that comes down to like, scaling coaching programs or just life in general. People don't really look at that. But that's where I rely on my natural ability of like, okay, cool, I know the principles. I just need to make sure everything aligns with the principles, and I think it'll be fine. So then it really came down to understanding that everything is all just like fundamentals. Like, for example, let's say trying to make someone buy, like persuasion. The book that was made, let's say in the 1800s about persuasion, is probably what's still going to work today because humans haven't really changed that much, like over that huge period. So when you really come down to that, as long as whatever you're trying to do, like whatever funnel, whatever system, whatever ads you're trying to do will hit those things of like, this is how you make someone curious. This is how you make someone click. This is how you make persuade someone. This is how you make someone buy. As long as you're hitting these fundamentals, whatever you're doing, it doesn't really matter. Everyone has different funnels. Everyone has different systems, but no one looks back to the fundamentals. So I looked at that and I was like, wait a minute, I'm just saying the same stuff over and over again. So what I was really looking for was just mastery of the fundamentals. And then once you have that, you can just start building upon it. You can start trying new stuff, being like, okay, cool, this is my fundamental that I need to make sure I hit. I can try this funnel because I think it will help do this. And if you keep doing that, you're going to have a lot of insights into making stuff work better. And that way, you're not going to be really guessing because you just look back and be like, okay, cool. If I was a human being, would this work for me? Probably not. I'm not going to do it. If I was a human being, would this work for me? Probably would. I'm going to do it.